radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Friday, September 6th. I hope everybody's had a fantastic week. As you can see, those of you on video at least, I am back in Barcelona in our temporary apartment in Barcelona, and I'll be here for the next week and a couple of days before heading to Israel. I'll be doing shows hopefully all next week. We'll see, and then in Israel, we'll see. We'll see when I'm available and what the availability is, and how many shows I'll be able to get going. Also, the state of Wi-Fi in the various hotels that I'm staying at. All of that to be determined. So today we're going to take a break from the news. I mean, we're dealing with something in the news, but we're going to take a break from the news and really dig a little deeper into a particular phenomena sadly, on the American right today. And we're gonna talk about this interview that Tucker Carlson did with this pseudo historian by the name of Yaron Cooper about World War II, and look at kind of some of the responses, or maybe lack of responses, really in many respects, on the right to this. There's been a firestorm around this. There's been a lot of discussion about this. There's been a lot written about it, mostly positive, mostly good, in the sense of condemning Yaron Cooper and to some extent condemning Tucker Carlson, mostly from the center, from the left, some from the right, particularly condemning Yaron Cooper from the right. I saw two articles in particular, one by Victor Davis Hanson and one by Niall Ferguson, two historians I really respect, analyze what Yaron Cooper said on the Tucker Carlson show. But I want to discuss a different dimension of this, and that is the culpability, the moral responsibility of Tucker Carlson, the moral sanction that Tucker Carlson is giving to basically a Nazi apologist, to somebody basically who has shown over years now that he is sympathetic to the Nazi cause, which is this so-called historian, Yaron Cooper. And I find it unbelievable, the relative silence of people on the right condemning Tucker Carlson, condemning him for having this guy as a guest, condemning him not just for having the guy on the guest, but for calling him, I can't share the exact phrase, but one of the most important or best or most interesting historians of our time, right? And in other words, promoting this guy, endorsing this guy, sanctioning this guy, providing him a moral sanction. Now, I get why Tucker's doing it. It's completely consistent with Tucker's MO. Tucker is becoming and has become a fascist. More than that, Tucker is, floating. Tucker is basically taking the stance, as many on the right have taken, that anybody who opposes the left is a good guy. Anybody who opposes the left is on the right side of history. Hitler opposes the left. Nazis oppose the left. Apologists for the Nazis oppose the left. Therefore, they must be on the right side of the battle for Western civilization. This is an evil perspective. And it's the perspective that brought us Hitler and the Nazis. And yet, nobody's condemning Tucker for taking this perspective. I just don't see it. Maybe people are, but I'm not seeing it. And we'll talk about Victor Davis Hanson and Neil Ferguson in a minute. Tucker has become one of the real bad guys. Not a little bit. Not, oh, I disagree with him sometimes. No, he's become on the status of an evil intellectual. An intellectual who is promoting evil ideas, who's trying, is endorsing, promoting, sanctioning, promoting evil ideas. Now, let me encourage everybody who listens to this show today to go to the Ayn Rand Institute YouTube channel and check out Onkar Ghatel's lecture from this last summer conference on moral sanction. On moral sanction. I think it's one of Onkar's best. I thought it was really, really, really good. I agreed with it 100%. And it's so relevant to so much of what we're seeing in the world around us. And it's so relevant to this case. Tucker Carlson has now become, in my view, somebody who it is wrong to go on a show. It is wrong to interact with him. It is wrong to promote his stuff. I'd even go as far as to say it's wrong to listen to his show, unless you have some real purpose in attacking it. Carlson is a supporter of evil. That's what he's become, and this latest interview with Yaron Cooper was just one more piece of something we've been seeing in Tucker evolve over years now, right? I've been talking about it for years. We certainly saw it in his interview with Putin and then the videos he did following the interview with Putin. A lot of it was just ridiculous and stupid, but there is a pattern. His promotion of conspiracy theories, his promotion of real anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic kind of ideas, and now the ultimate, which is becoming an apologist for the Nazis. And you might say, well, wait, Tucker was an apologist for the Nazis. When you have somebody on your show who clearly is stating views that are trying to justify the Nazis, trying to whitewash what the Nazis did, and who, as we'll talk about in a second, positions Churchill as the bad guy of World War II, and you don't say anything, you've basically endorsed, you've basically sanctioned, you've basically embraced Nazi ideology. You are a Nazi apologist. Now, I have to admit at this point in the show, that right now, I kind of miss Scott, right? I'm really curious how somebody like Scott is now going to justify working with Tucker, his big tent with Tucker, sanctioning Tucker, supporting Tucker. Can you imagine the convoluted arguments he is now going to make about, oh no, everybody needs to hear a voice. All Tucker was doing is asking questions. He's just asking questions. Everybody should have their day in the sun or whatever. That, once you start sanctioning people like Tucker, once you apologize for people like Tucker, once you provide Tucker with cover, you are sanctioning the sanctioners, and you are just as bad, just as evil, just as wrong. So we're not going to watch the show here for a couple of reasons. One is I don't want to give this guy, this monster, Yaron Cooper, any airtime. You can go watch it on X if you want, and you can read the critiques of it, which I'll list a few. Also, technologically, when I'm on the road, I have trouble showing video. The sound doesn't always go to the right, to you directly. Anyway, it's much more difficult to do these commentary on videos while I'm on the road. So that's another reason I'm not doing it. But yes, there we go. So I won't be actually showing it. We might. I think in these articles, I think we might be able to have some quotes if you're interested in quotes about it. I'm surprised you don't know about it. It's all over the web. It's all over Twitter, certainly. When it first came out, just to give you an example of this, when this interview first came out by Tucker of this guy, Elon Musk retweeted it with this is something like, "This is interesting." He deleted it very quickly afterwards and then wrote some tweets in opposition to it without actually accusing it. But where's the tweet by Elon Musk saying, "This was horrible" by Tucker Carlson? Tucker Carlson should not be interviewing people like this. Indeed, this is just horrific that Tucker has sunk this low. Where's that tweet by Elon Musk? And I know we're not supposed to criticize Elon Musk. He's John Galt to many of you. But that's creepy that Elon Musk will not condemn a Nazi apologist, a Nazi sympathizer, really. It's more than an apologist. He's a sympathizer at this point. Where is Jordan Peterson? Where is everybody else? I'm not talking about defending Churchill and condemning Hitler. That's easy. I'm talking about where are they condemning Tucker Carlson? Where are they condemning him for doing this interview, for publishing it? Are they afraid that they come across as leftists who actually have an opinion and condemn alternative opinions? But they do that all the time. They condemn the woke. Why can't they condemn Nazis? Is it because they want to keep their options open about being interviewed by Tucker Carlson because he has such a huge audience? Which is kind of scary, right? Tucker Carlson, this video trying to justify the Nazis, has over 25 million views. So where are these people? So Victor Davis Hanson, who's an historian I have a lot of respect for, particularly when he does military history, and what I've read by Victor Davis Hanson about World War II is really, really excellent. So Victor Davis Hanson had a piece in the Free Press, as did Niall Ferguson. And this is Victor Davis Hanson's opening, right? In a recent and now widely seen Tucker Carlson interview, a guest historian named Yaron Cooper casually presented a surprising number of flawed theories about World War II. I mean, this is Victor Davis Hanson writing. This is a brilliant writer. This is somebody who has written brilliantly about World War II and about defending Western civilization. And here he is, granting Yaron Cooper the title of historian, where he is nothing of the sort. And, then surprising number of flawed theories. Pretty mild. To continue, Victor Davis, he focused his misstatements on the respective roles of Winston Churchill's Britain, Adolf Hitler's Germany, especially in matters of treatment and fate of Russian prisoners, the Holocaust, the systemic slaughtering of Jews, strategic bombing, and the nature of Winston Churchill. Surprising number of flawed theories. We're talking about systemic slaughtering of Jews and strategic, and the Holocaust, and it's just that anyway. This is Victor Davis Hanson trying to be really cool and calm and collect and I guess objective. I don't know. But then Hanson goes through and he basically rips to shred Cooper's assertions. Cooper makes this assertion about all those killings in 1941 of Poles and Russians and Jews and all of that. Oh, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. Logistics. The Nazis didn't have the logistics to deal with it. They engaged. They started this war, and suddenly they were flooded with millions of these people in camps, and they didn't know what to do with them, and a lot of them died. That's literally the way Cooper presents it. And what Victor Davis Hanson does, as a good historian does, is he basically goes through and he shows that is complete and utter nonsense. That is, he shows that that Hitler had every intention. Hitler literally called the 1941 attack on Russia a war of extermination of communists, of the leaders of the communist movement, of Jews, of Bolsheviks, of Russians. It was a war of extermination. It was not an accident. It was not a mistake. It was not a challenge of logistics. Hitler had every intent to kill millions of people, including millions of Jews, as part of this. Here's the way Cooper presents it. They launched a war where they were completely unprepared. Millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth. And they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps. And millions of people ended up dead. We don't know exactly why. They ended up dead, right? Concentration camps, gas chambers, systematic slaughter of hundreds of thousands, millions of people, Russians, Poles, and of course Jews, in these camps. They just ended up dead, right? You have like letters as early as July 1941 from commandants, of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering, or people that they are rounding up. Why are they rounding them up? Why are they rounding up? He doesn't get into that. He doesn't want to go there, right? And they're writing back to that command in Berlin saying, quote, "We can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people." And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now? No mention of the fact that this war was called a war of extermination. No mention of the actual orders that Hitler gave. And Victor Davis Hanson, and then now Ferguson, do an excellent job of just eviscerating this. And, now Ferguson says, note that at no point in their conversation do Carlson and Cooper mention the Holocaust. The word genocide is never uttered. They talk about Jews a good deal, but not as the principal victim of Hitler's lethal racial policies. They don't exist. Victor Davis Hanson, presents all the evidence of the fact that Hitler started this war. Hitler knew exactly what he was doing. And that these weren't accidents that happened. But where's the moral fire? Where's the condemnation of Tucker Carlson? Where Victor Davis Hanson and Al Ferguson really get, excited is where this Cooper guy attacks Churchill. Cooper, in the interview with Churchill, in the interview with Tucker Carlson, basically said Churchill is the chief villain of World War II. He is the number one villain of World War II. He's the bad guy. Hitler might be a villain too, but the villain of World War II is Churchill. Now here, they get really, they provide all the evidence to suggest this is completely wrong and this is not true. By the way, one of the things Cooper says about Churchill is one of the reasons Churchill wanted the war, right? Hitler supposedly, according to Cooper, constantly vied for peace, constantly wanted peace, and Churchill kept going. And not only kept going, but insisted on slaughtering millions of German civilians. And one of the reasons Churchill did this is because he was basically in the pocket of Jews, of pro-Zionist elements, Jews in the West. Churchill also conspired to get the United States into the war. And again, if you want the analysis of why that is completely wrong historically, it is completely wrong historically. Victor Davis Hanson and Neil Ferguson do a great job presenting that. But again, Ferguson has a little bit more anger, but almost all the anger is targeted towards Cooper. Almost none of it is towards Carlson. What Ferguson does, which I think is good, Neil Ferguson, is he does identify what is driving this, right? And what's driving this is this attitude towards the left. What's driving this is the idea that the left is anti-Western, which is true. The left is destroying the West. The left is evil. The left is bad. And therefore, anything that opposes the left, and what is the opposite of the left? If we really push the envelope of what the opposite of the left, according to these guys, it really is fascism. If we push the envelope on fascism, the real opposition to the left are the Nazis. They're the real opposition to the left, after all. I mean, why did Hitler launch this war, if not to destroy the Bolsheviks, to destroy communism, to destroy the left? In order to do what? According to Carlson and Cooper, basically in order to save Western civilization from destruction. So, you remember Jordan Peterson's support for Putin? And Jordan Peterson basically said, look, Putin is the real Westerner. He really stands with the West. It's Ukraine, which is supported by Europe and by the Democratic Party, and therefore by the left, by the global left. They are the anti-Western elements. And therefore we must support Putin in the war because that is supporting Western civilization. And to the extent that Ukraine is successful in the war, to that extent the enemy of the West are winning. The identification of Western values with authoritarians like Putin and Hitler, with regimes that are filled with hate and violence, that is the West. So we have here a great example of how we have the modern American right conflating the West with fascism, conflating the left, the West with authoritarianism, conflating it, of course, with religion or nationalism, or both, religious nationalism, in the case of Putin, religious nationalism, in the case of the Nazis, nationalism. But it was also mystical, it was also religious. Here's Tucker. Tucker says to Cooper at some point during the interview, as a follower of your work, I don't see you as hostile to the West, right? Because he's promoting the Nazis after all. I see you actually as a product of the West, as a defender, really, of the West and its values. So Cooper, who is saying Churchill is the bad guy, right? Churchill, one of the great heroes of modern Western civilization, a savior. There's a great quote here from Neil Ferguson about, this is Neil Ferguson about Churchill. I've never argued that Churchill was a saint, any more than have his greatest biographers. And I have consistently echoed A.G.P. Taylor's verdict that he was, quote, the savior of his country. More, Churchill was the savior of Western civilization. Had he not stiffened British resolve in the time before Hitler in his hubris declared war on the Soviet Union and the United States, the repulsive, blood-drenched empire that was the Third Reich might conceivably have won the war. True, Churchill made common cause with Stalin to beat Hitler. But he knew Stalin for the brutal dictator he was. And he was among the very first to see that World War II would soon be followed by Cold War I. So, but no, I mean, for Tucker, this Nazi apologist is Western civilization. Now, as Neil Ferguson writes, this is a new and unusual use of the term West as a synonym for Third Reich, which is the only thing Cooper has thus far seemed serious about defending. Ferguson is completely right. Where's the condemnation of Tucker? I read the whole article, waiting for condemnation of Tucker. Where is it? He continues. This is again Ferguson. But as the conversation moves on, we see that this is, quote, the West, as it is understood in Moscow and Budapest these days. Well, maybe this is why we hesitate to go after Tucker, because now Ferguson might not be one of these Budapest sympathizers, Orban sympathizers, or sympathetic with Putin and Russia. But certainly many of his friends on the right are. Indeed, the entire Republican Party, the entire modern, new, MAGA conservative movement is enamored by Viktor Orban of Budapest and is sympathetic to Putin in Moscow. So it's clear that the West, as Tucker Carlson understands it, the West as Cooper understands it, is a fascist West. To continue with Neil Ferguson, for the Hungarians today, according to Cooper, quote, have no problem saying this is Hungary. This is a country for Hungarians. This is a Christian country. This is our country. They don't have a problem saying that. And then he goes on, comparing that to modern London, for example. Tucker Carlson says, quote, it's totally, this is about London, it's totally degraded. I try not to go there because it's so depressing. It's just so sad. It's so broken. It's not the country of victors. It's a defeated, completely defeated country that's subsequently been invaded. If Churchill is a hero, how come there are British girls begging for drugs on the streets of London? God, let that sink in. And London is not majority English anymore. Like what? Cooper says, well, the people who formulated the version of history that considers Churchill a hero, they like London the way it is now. Now, it's people like Neil Ferguson and Victor Davis Hansen that have done the history that considers Churchill a hero, among hundreds, thousands of others. And yet they are so placid, so calm in condemning Tucker Carlson. Here's Yaron Cooper about the post-World War II, what happened. He says, quote, the post-World War II order is really defined by the fact that, after Nuremberg, it really became effectively illegal in the West to be like genuinely right-wing. Like the things we call right-wing, unquote. As Ferguson writes, the only right-wing parties that are illegal in Europe today are the Nazi parties. And the only people who regard the Nuremberg war crime trials as sacrificial rituals, Cooper, are Nazis. So there's no question here about what Cooper represents. Cooper is an apologist for the Nazis. He's resurrecting Nazi ideology. He's resurrecting the anti-Semitic view that the Jews were behind the whole thing and that they manipulated it all. And, maybe he didn't go about it the right way, but maybe Hitler had the right idea about the Jews. And again, this is not coming from some fringe, Cooper maybe is fringe, but this is not coming from some fringe, minor podcaster out there. This is coming from Tucker Carlson, who used to have, just until recently, the most popular television show in America on Fox. And today has one of the largest audiences, maybe second or third to Joe Rogan, in the world. Or in the US at least, I don't know about the world. And he is promoting Nazism. And he's promoting Nazism as the solution to the left, as the alternative to the left. And he's still being treated as if he's just the old Tucker Carlson, just a guy who's asking questions. He's, are people not going on a show because of this? I just saw he's on a tour right now. He's in Denver on a tour. And he's got guests, pretty prominent people coming to be on a show. Nobody's saying, oh, no, he's a Nazi apologist now. We're not going on a show. Is Elon Musk thinking of not retweeting him again? I doubt it. It's like we live in a culture that refuses to make moral judgments unless it's tribal moral judgments. We hate everybody associated with that tribe. We have members in our tribe who are a little flaky, who are a little out there, who say really horrible things. And I wish they really didn't say that. But they're in our tribe, so we got to tolerate them. But there's no idea in our culture, there really isn't the idea of somebody advocating for evil ideas should be treated as evil and should be condemned as evil and should be shunned. Doesn't necessarily kick him off the platform, but it depends on whose platform it is and it depends what your standards are. But it certainly means you don't retweet his stuff. It certainly means you don't promote his stuff. If you think about why one should not sanction evil. Because whenever you sanction evil, you legitimize it. Whenever Elon Musk retweets a tweet by Tucker Carlson, he legitimizes Tucker Carlson. Elon Musk, justifiably, is viewed as this incredible businessman, very successful human being, rational, good guy. As you know, I don't think he always is, but that's how he's viewed in the culture. And every time he retweets Tucker Carlson, people go, well, Tucker Carlson must be okay. Victor Davis Hanson is a prominent historian. I disagree with him on a lot of stuff, his attitude towards Trump. Certainly I disagree with him about immigration. But, he's a respected historian. And I have a lot of respect for him as an historian. His silence about Tucker Carlson, while condemning the historian that was on Tucker Carlson's show, is deafening. And it basically suggests, well, Tucker doesn't deserve to be criticized. Maybe Tucker's endeavor is a valid endeavor. Maybe he's just making a mistake. Maybe he's just an innocent bystander. The same with Niall Ferguson. I wonder if Tucker invites Victor Davis Hanson on a show, if Hanson will go. I wonder if Ferguson would go. I had Hersey Ali, who's married to Ferguson. Jordan Peterson. Will they go on Tucker's show? Will they invite Tucker on their show? Will they just treat Tucker as just a normal human being? every time we treat somebody who holds evil ideas as just okay, we elevate those ideas. We help promote those ideas. We normalize those ideas. We normalize the person, we normalize the ideas. And if you care about your own life, if you are a moral person who wants to live a good life, you do not elevate ideas that are evil. You do not elevate people that are evil. You do not give them a platform. You do not sanction them, because that will lead to your destruction. Your destruction. So the only attitude towards Tucker Carlson is to shun him, to turn him off, and to condemn him everywhere and at every opportunity possible. Because this is exactly what happened in Germany. Many of the intellectuals were silent about the evil that Hitler represented. Many of the intellectuals said, well, but at least he's against the communists. At least he's against the left. At least he'll bring order. There's chaos in our streets. At least he'll bring some order. And the various Nazi propagandists and activists and movements that were out there, they were all tolerated. They were all accepted. And the better people just went along in silence without morally condemning it. It is their silence that made the Nazis possible. And the sooner you speak up, the sooner you condemn, the sooner you shun, the sooner you make clear the evil that you're facing, the more likely it is that you will stop that evil. The more you wait, the stronger the evil gets. I mean, it's hard to believe we're even talking about this. If I told you 4 years ago that this is where Tucker was, you would have said, no, Yaron, you're just exaggerating, you're nuts. Maybe even 2 years ago, maybe even 1 year ago, maybe even 6 months ago. But now, the evidence is unequivocal. So, this is not, I don't think in morality this is optional. It is necessary to condemn him. And those of you who still want some kind of big tent coalition with these bastards, then you are bringing about the death of the West. Now, part of this is this idea that the West is, what defines the West is anti-left. What defines the West is anti-egalitarianism. What defines the West is anti what the left represents. That's just not true. That's not what the West is. Or that what defines the West is nationalism. Or what defines the West is Christianity. Just not true. Indeed, the West is the rejection of all those things. The West is a universalist ideology. It's not a nationalist ideology. The West is a secular ideology. It is not a religious ideology. The West stands for something that is the exact opposite of what the Nazis and Orban and Putin and all the dictatorial thugs in the world represent. They're the exact opposite. The West is fundamentally a product of the Enlightenment, of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. The West fundamentally is the idea of reason as guiding man's mind, man's behavior, reason as our only means of knowledge. It's the negation in that sense, or the trivialization, at least, of religion and its importance in human life. The West is also individualistic. It is about the value of the individual. It is the individual who has a mind. Collectives do not. Tribes do not. Nations do not. Every individual has a mind. Every individual is capable of reason at whatever level of integration and abstraction they can achieve. Every individual that has a mind is capable of observing the world, understanding it, and choosing values based on that. You're not determined by your genes. You're not determined by your race. You're not determined by your nation. You are an individual no matter where you were born. That is the Enlightenment. Individualism. The sanctity of the individual. The individual's right, political right and moral right, to live his life for his own sake, for his own happiness, for his own well-being. That's the Enlightenment. And the political consequence of both those ideas is the Enlightenment is pro-political freedom, political liberty, in the form of the Western world as we've come to know it, where we are basically free. We have free speech. Less than what we would like, but we have free speech. We have that right. We have right to property. We have right to live our lives based on our own values, the pursuit of our own happiness. And we get to choose our leaders. We don't get them imposed on us from the top. That is the West. It's the rejection of Orban with his negation of free speech, with his control of the media, which is massive intervention in the economy, and with his imposition of Christian values on the population. It is the opposite of Putin, with his nationalism and Christianity and warmongering and war and the demand for sacrifice for some greater Russia, greater Russian spiritual being. And it is, of course, the opposite of Hitler. Hitler, Putin, they're not the same, but they're in the same political space. They're nationalists. They're mystics. They're collectivists. They demand the sacrifice of the individual for the sake of the collective. You know, one collective might be the Aryan race or German people. The other collective might be the Russian people, the history of Rus or whatever. The same thing, though. Both are fundamentally collectivist. Negate the individual. And by doing so, they negate Western civilization. Indeed, the communist, fascist, authoritarian projects of Stalin or Lenin, why Stalin? Lenin and Hitler and the Putin and the Orbans of the world, and now I'll add Tucker Carlson. Their agenda is an anti-Western agenda. They are the reactionary forces fighting against capitalism. They're the reactionary forces fighting against individualism, fighting against reason. They are mystics, all of them. They're collectivists, all of them. They're statists, all of them. Anti-capitalist, all of them. And that's been capitalism's struggle from the beginning. That's been freedom's struggle from the beginning. That's been the Enlightenment ideas struggle from the beginning. They have struggled against reactionary forces, forces that don't like the Enlightenment. They don't like the Renaissance. They want to go back to, what was it, 1212, whatever that was, right? They want to go back to the Middle Ages, where there was hierarchy. Men were men, women were women. Everybody knew their place. Serfs were serfs. Jews were in the ghetto. Ghettos were really established later, but Jews knew their place. That is their vision of the West. A Christian, authoritarian, hierarchical. And hierarchy here, not the hierarchy in the sense of, well, some people are more able than others, they rise faster, they may become wealthier, they might be more successful in business. No, here hierarchy is determined by birth. Hierarchy is determined by genes. Hierarchy is determined by birthright. Hierarchy is determined politically, political hierarchy. Some have more, quote, rights than others. That vision of supposed West is an anti-Western vision, promoted now by everybody on the right in some degree or another. So, somebody's saying Europe will be Muslim, not Christian. Really? Really? If the AfD wins in Germany, is Germany going to be Muslim, not Christian? Do you think the AfD, if they win, if the fascists in Europe win, you think they'll tolerate the Muslims? You think they won't kill them all and make it a Christian nation? Where do you live? Who's winning elections? And what is their agenda? But that's the old medieval. These are medievalists. They want to take us back to medieval times. What do you want? That commentator on Daily Wire, I forget his name, who wanted us to go back to 1212 or 1220 or whatever it was. He was at least honest. He told us exactly what they want. And the reactionaries, the anti-enlightenment, anti-capitalist movements in the world are always anti-Semitic. They always hate the Jews. The Jews are not Christian. They stand in opposition to Christianity. The Jews don't have, or at least didn't have, a nation. Now they have one, but they're still all over the place. And the hatred goes towards the nation as well. The Jews are successful. Isn't it interesting how left and right unite in the hatred of successful Jews? And therefore must be manipulative, must be conspiratorial. The Jews, at the end of the day, are behind all bad in the world. Again, left and right unite here on these points. Notice how left and right are not that different. And this is why Hitler could unite Germany and get a significant number of Germans supporting him, both from left and right, because the differences are not real. They're not big. And why ultimately many German communists became German Nazis, because they share so much in common. This is the real scary part about what is going on in America, and how the left and the right are evolving to be the same and to be united by an authoritarian one day. Zarub says, what does he say? Christianity will be gone in 2100. One could only hope that Christianity is actually dead in, what is that, less than 80 years. I mean, that would be amazing if that were true. Yeah, here we go. Here's somebody on my chat, right? The right has no problem with the Jews. The Jews are hard pushers of communism because many are self-haters. And he's probably considers himself on the right, and he says, I have no problem with the Jews, but the Jews are all communists, and they hate themselves. So of course he has a problem with the Jews. This is anti-Semitism right here on my channel. Right. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, you know, everybody sane in the world right now should be really worried. We should be really, really, really worried. And I don't think we should be worried about Muslims. I mean, we should, but that's not the threat. They're too weak, too pathetic. They can wield a knife, but they can't do real damage. The real damage The real damage being done right now is by Westerners. Whether it's the crazy egalitarian left that just wants to destroy everything, or the crazy religious fascist right who wants to destroy everything. Nihilism is on the rise on both left and right. And what is just stunning is the relative silence, the silence of those who should know better. Silence. In the face of, I'm not talking about in the face of just, I don't know, J.D. Vance conservatism, in the face of Nazis. Silence, acquiescence, sanction, acceptance. Pretty, I don't know, it's pretty depressing. Now, supposedly there's an article on the National Review website by Jeffrey Bleha. I don't subscribe, so I can't read it. He has an article called "We Need to Talk About Tucker Again," where supposedly he condemns Tucker and everything Tucker stands for. I don't have access to it. I can't read the article itself, but I've been told that that's what he says. Good for this guy. This is what I want to see, much more than the historical condemnation of the pseudo-historian. That stuff is relatively easy to do. I'm glad Victor Davis Hanson did it. I'm even more glad Neil Ferguson did it. Ferguson had a little bit more moral angst to it and urgency to it. So I'm glad they both did it. And I encourage you to read their articles because you'll get the history right. At the Free Press, one came out September 5th. The other one was on September 6th, so day after day. On the Free Press, on Barry Weiss's publication, you can find real historians talking about what really happened during World War II, not this pseudo-history that Tucker Carlson is pitching in the name of defending the West. But I really want us to think about what is it going to take to defend the West? And one of the most important things it's going to take to defend the West is uncompromising condemnation of all those arrayed against the West. Those on the left, woke, egalitarian, nihilistic bastards, and those on the right, Nazi apologists, fascist supporters of Putin and Orban, and all the rest of them. So you have to condemn them all. And until there's a wide-ranging movement to condemn them and to stand for a semblance of freedom. Don't have to be all out objectivist about it, but just a semblance of freedom. We're cooked, people. We are cooked. Because the silence will only lead us to greater and greater acceptance of these ideas. Nikos on Twitter makes a good point about Tucker, and this is, I think, a point that again shows how left and right are becoming the same. Far left, far right are becoming the same. He writes, what stood out to me in the Tucker Carlson Daryl Cooper interview is how much the new right shares with their purple-haired cousins of the woke left. Notice the theme in Tucker Cooper episode. Quote, history suffers from not seeing the perspective of the other side. How did the Germans really feel? This is a major theme in postmodernism. Truth is a matter of perspective. The oppressed have their own perspective, and thus their own truth, different from that of the oppressor. Notice that this isn't about discovering all the facts or steel-manning the other side. This is pure, unadulterated relativism. And relativism is a potent weapon for every immoral piece of garbage. Hitler is someone whose story we haven't heard. Is the equivalent, is by the way, both Tucker and Candace's perspective, is the equivalent of the woke, the oppressed of Hamas, might commit every atrocity imaginable, but we Western colonialists have no right to judge them. This is epistemological horseshoe theory, with the new right and the woke post-colonial left on the two sides, a plague on both their houses. I agree with Nikos. I mean, one of the best examples of this was when we did the show about Dugin, the Russian philosopher Dugin, and the extent to which Dugin is a postmodernist, an admitted so, an admirer of postmodernism. That is, the new right is explicitly, often implicitly because they won't acknowledge it or because they're not smart enough to see it, postmodernists. They've adopted the framework of the left. In that sense, they're all Kantians. They're all children of Kant. And it is still true that the most important book you can read about World War II, the most important book you can read about the Nazis, the most important book describing the cause and the rise of Nazism is Ominous Parallels by Leonard Peikoff, who shows that the Nazis are children of Kant and German Romantic philosophy. But so is the left. So is postmodernism. The intellectual roots are the same. Intellectual foundations are the same. But I have to say, Nikos found that standing out in the conversation. What stood out to me is just how unabashedly Tucker and Cooper, in particular Tucker, are now Nazi apologists without any qualms, without any problems. All in the name of, we're just asking questions about the other side, and it's good to experiment with different dimensions and different perspectives, and other stuff that might be going on. I don't know. This world, it's and Tucker in the meantime is on a tour. He's going to have a conversation with Bobby Kennedy. I wonder if Bobby Kennedy will bring up anything related to this pro-Nazi interview. He's going to have a conversation with Vivek. Vivek, you guys all love Vivek. I wonder if Vivek will bring up any of these issues about Tucker Carlson's support for a Nazi apologist. I wonder if any of them will challenge Carlson on his new perspective on history or on his new perspective on the West. Can I guess? Can I guess that the answer is basically no? That RFK and Vivek are not going to say a word, even if they disagree with Tucker, even if they think Tucker's wrong on this, although I don't know what Vivek thinks. But they won't say anything. And by the way, it looks like Tucker is now in partnership with the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation. Heritage is a major think tank. Used to be mainstream conservative. Now they're in partnership with a Nazi apologist. Call it like it is. And then Tucker goes on, he's on a tour in Phoenix where he's with Russell Brand. So Russell Brand has no problem working with, appearing with, dealing with this revealed now Tucker Carlson, although I think we knew what he was even before this. All because he's heterodox, all because he's different, all because he's anti-left. They tolerate him. They're happy not to tolerate him. They completely embrace him. This is how the West dies. By those of you who know better, by those of you who understand what the West represents, and you stay silent when the West is being attacked by people who perceive themselves and who the world perceives as on the side of the West. I don't know. I don't know if that's clarifying or not, but yeah. If you are Tucker Carlson fans, it's time to end it. It's time to break that relationship. All right. Let's see. So yeah, we'll take your questions now. Happy to talk about anything relating to this or other stuff that's going on. Yeah, I mean, there was that story. There's a really interesting story about the Russians paying off the right-wing media company that a lot of pretty prominent people, including Dave Rubin, are affiliated with, and somehow the Russian propaganda machine was paying these people, or it's not clear who knew what, but it's pretty spooky when you think about Tim Pool, is it Tim Pool? Rants against Ukraine and pro-Russia, pro-Putin. Rants. And again, Tim Pool is huge. And then you consider the fact that the Russians invested $10 million in getting Tenant, the media company, invested $10 million in this company that Tim Pool was one of its, I don't know, media representatives. And it just happened that he was vehemently anti-Ukraine, pro-Russia, and the Russians were invested in this company. And Dave Rubin was part of this, and I'm pretty sure that Dave didn't know what was going on, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. Because, with all due respect, there's real corruption here. And there are really, really corrupt people here. All right, looks like Konstantin Kisin has a piece going after Tucker, which is good. Konstantin, this is very good, Konstantin. And he basically, here's a quote, I'm just reading this for the first time. Okay, quote, Tucker Carlson has just hosted a man called Yaron Cooper on his show, describing him as maybe the best and most honest popular historian in the United States. Cooper, who goes by the online monkey of Martyr Madej, is indeed incredibly honest, and he's being cynical here. He shows that image that I talked about last show with Hitler in Paris on one and the opening ceremony in Paris on the other screen, and where this Cooper guy says the opening ceremony with the trans that was attacking Christianity, and this Cooper guy says the picture of Hitler, much better, much preferable to the woke leftist picture. Anyway, Kisin goes on, in addition to thinking that Adolf Hitler, a genocidal mass murderer strolling through Paris, he had just conquered, is highly preferable to drag queens. Cooper also explained that Churchill was the chief villain in World War II. The third he posted on X following his interview with Carlson is so historically illiterate that every major claim he made was debunked on X itself within hours with community notes and in articles published by prominent historians. But this article is not about Cooper. I do not find him remotely interesting. There are and have always been lying charlatans and overconfident fools. Very good. What is interesting is the warm welcome he received on Tucker Carlson's show and what it represents. Why can't I read the whole thing? Again, I'm not a subscriber on Kissin's thing, but okay, let's start my trial. Oh, but I have to do all that. Fine. All right, let's see if it'll let me read it. No, it won't let me read it. Anyway, he says the woke right, for which Carlson is an undisputed spiritual leader, is feeling its way to a logic of its own. It is far from being fully formed, but it goes something like this. And he criticized the woke right as, I assume, in similar ways to the way I've criticized it. So good for Kissen. Kissen is smart. He's sharp. I don't always agree with him. And I certainly don't agree with him about morality and the need for Christianity, even though he's, I think, an atheist. He's good on this. So good. I'm glad you guys are surfacing the people who are actually criticizing all these guys. I haven't seen any moral condemnation by Victor Davis Hanson of Tucker Carlson. Haven't seen it. Okay, Kissen, cool. I'm all for. All right. Let's go to your questions. Before we do that, let me do a few things. One is remind you that you become a monthly supporter of the Yaron Brook Show. This is a viewer-supported show. A listener-supported show. You can do that by going to Patreon and subscribing to Yaron Brook Show, or you can go to Patreon, or you can go to yaronbrookshow.com/membership and use PayPal to subscribe. You can also use the super chat here, or the sticker features, if you're watching live and on YouTube. You can't do that on Twitter, but you can do it on YouTube and support the show that way. And of course, you can also, those are the ways in which you can support the show. Now, we also have sponsors. Alex Epstein, alexepstein.substack.com, best thinker on issues related to environmentalism, energy, fossil fuels that I know. He's excellent. He's got talking points on all the big issues related to those fields. You should definitely subscribe to his Substack. The Ayn Rand Institute right now is promoting the conference in Australia. Registration is open for those of you who are not going to be applying for scholarships. Hopefully all my listeners in Australia, I hope all of you, every single one of you, I know there are several hundred of you, come to the conference in Brisbane in December 6th through 8th, giving you plenty of notice. I will be there. Nikos will be there. We're going to have a great time. In Brisbane, December 6th to 8th, you can go to the Ayn Rand Institute website. I think at aynrand.org/start here, you can find information about the conference. If you can't find it there, just check out aynrand.org. It's available. You can sign up for the conference whether you're applying for a scholarship or not. But of course, if you are a student, or if you don't live in Australia and you'd like to come in and you're a student, sign up for the scholarship. And then finally, John Barban, Barban, PHILIFE, PHILIFE channel on YouTube is kind of an integration of all the information you get on life extension, on health, on exercise, and all these things. Integrated it and personalized an attempt to give you the tools to be able to personalize all that information for your own health and for your own betterment. So check him out on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel. All right. Let's take a look at the super chat here and see what we have. And look, if you guys are finding people that actually are condemning them morally, then great. I think that's great. You know, send me, but I want the condemnation to be of Carlson, of Tucker Carlson, not of the historian. The historian. Let me just see. It says here Yasmin Mohammed here. She criticized Carlson. I'm just looking for it. Let's just. I'm gonna get your questions in 1 second. This is just live research as we speak. Yeah, that's not it. She's good on defending Israel. and on attacking Islam. I don't see her going after Tucker. Maybe she did. If somebody has it, tweet it to me. That would be great. But I'm not saying she didn't. I just don't see it. Somebody tweeted me that she did, but didn't send me the link. Anyway, all right. Let's go to your questions. Michael, $50. Thank you, Michael. That's very generous. And yeah, keep the questions coming. We got plenty of time today. Keep the questions coming, preferably $50, $20, $100 questions so we can make our targets. Do you think most people can't grasp objectivism, not just because they are dishonest, but because they can't think deeply? Most people's minds are a submarine that can only go down so far, not far enough to connect the dots. No, I mean, I don't think this is an issue of intelligence. I don't think this is an issue of IQ. I think a vast majority of humanity has the IQ, the intelligence, potential to understand the basics of objectivism, to understand at some level that it's right. Most people just don't exercise their minds. It's not an issue of capability. It's not an issue of potential. It's an issue of actual mind. Do I think too many people out there in the world, or large, majority of the world, evade and are out of focus when it comes to many of these intellectual issues? Yeah, I absolutely think that many of these people evade and are out of focus on these issues. And that is the fundamental cause. The fundamental cause is the choice not to think. And then, of course, the inability to stay in focus and the unwillingness to stay oriented towards reality instead of evading. That's interesting. Okay, so we have, so all these people criticizing Israel, who claim to be sympathetic to objectivism or whatever, here it is. These are, here it is. So this one guy just on Twitter just wrote, Yaron still thinks Nazis turned his people into soap and lampshades. They didn't. They didn't. They didn't exterminate the Jews. So they're all Holocaust deniers. They're all anti-Semites. It really is fascinating to me how you think, okay, well, maybe somebody's just criticizing Israel because they really criticize Israel because they really think Israel's a flawed country and there are problems with Israel. No. They all turn out to be Jew haters. They all turn out to be anti-Semites. And yes, they might explain it as, ethnicity is an anti-concept. Ayn Rand said, so there is no such thing as Jew. Or they might come up with some kind of other epistemological or pseudo-epistemological explanation and argument about Jews this, Jews that. But we don't really hate Jews. We just treat people as individuals. But in the end of the day, what they really are is primitive, barbaric, anti-Semitic creeps, Holocaust denier, Nazi-supporting creeps who do unbelievable harm to the objectivist movement by even associating themselves with the objectivist movement, even a smidgen. And stop debating them. Stop dealing with them. You can't debate the irrational. You can't debate with people who don't care about truth, who don't care about reality, who just care about the unbelievable hatreds, the hatred that they have. And I have no idea what they found in Ayn Rand, but Ayn Rand would condemn them to hell if she knew what they stood for. So Michael, I don't think it's that they don't have the capacity. I think that they have the capacity but don't use it. And why don't they use it? There's no why. There's no reason other than they've adopted bad ideas. They've accepted the cultural view about thinking. and they're cowards, and they're dishonest. Michael also asked, hatred is a bizarre psychological, biological phenomenon. It's not a momentary response to a threat. People can marinate in resentment and hatred for their entire lives. Yeah, but people can marinate in all kinds of emotions for their entire lives, and it's unhealthy. This is why you get so many psychologically unhealthy people, because they latch onto particular emotions and they marinate and they obsess about them for very long periods of time. And so there's nothing unique about hatred with regard to that. Hatred is a legit emotion about identifying a real threat to you, somebody who is doing an injustice towards you, and you have the appropriate emotional response to that, which is hatred. Now, and that, thing that they do to you might be direct, it might be somebody you know, and might be indirect. It might be a thinker. It might be somebody like Tucker Carlson. At this point, I hate Tucker Carlson. Doesn't mean I stew on it, don't marinate with it. I don't think about it very often. But if you ask me what my main attitude towards Tucker Carlson is, hatred. I despise the guy because he is a threat to my values. He's a threat to my world. He's a threat to my ideas. He's a threat to everything I value and everything I care about. Just like I hate the left. I hate woke. Why? I don't marinate over it. I don't stew over it. But I identify it as a threat to my values, and therefore I hate it. I want it out of my life. I want to argue, debate against it. Michael says, not knowing how to say no is a form of self-sabotage. Definitely. I mean, this is true in business. This is true in relationships. This is true in life. You've got to be able to say no. Steve Jobs had a great line about this. I can't remember it exactly, but something to the effect of that. As a leader, you have to say many, many more no's than yeses. You have to know. A big chunk of leadership is knowing what not to do. What projects you shouldn't be spending time on. It's not just identifying the project you should, but knowing to say no to all the things that are not good. Garbled Senk Uyghur. There is a clip of just that argument. Of course, he has to criticize AIPAC as a Hamas apologist with any of... Okay, I mean, I'll look for that. Let me copy that. I'll look for it if there's a clip of that. These leftists can't... I mean, Marx had a much, much better understanding of what capitalism is than people like Sanction is broke. Frozen? Yaron is frozen. Am I frozen for everybody? Okay. Trying to come back. Do you want to build a snowman? I don't know. I'm still frozen. All right. Let me know if I'm back. 1, 2, 3, back, coming back, unfrozen when I'm streaming myself. Okay, I'm back. Okay. People like the modern left, they have no conception of what capitalism is, what it means, what it achieved, what it did. All right. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that they can't separate capitalism from corporatism. But I'll look for the clip and see. Ali took crime against Arab. I don't feel offended. Isn't it some kind of collective thinking and victimhood? I don't think it offends the Jews. I think it offends everybody. It should offend everybody who values the truth. That is, Holocaust denial is offensive. Now, I don't think it should be illegal. I think it should be legal, and I think the slippery slope into hate speech laws and into the denial of free speech that Europe has gone through all started with Holocaust denying laws, laws against Holocaust deniers. I don't believe there should be laws against Holocaust deniers. But it doesn't offend me as a Jew. I don't know what that even means. It offends me as a human being. When you take one of the great crimes in all of human history and you deny it, that is horrible. And it's always motivated by something. Usually it's motivated by a hatred for the victim of that crime, a hatred for Jews. So Jews are worried by Holocaust denial if it becomes prevalent. But if one person denies the Holocaust, who cares? I don't care. This is why I even said, I'm not that worried about this historian Cooper. I'm worried about Tucker Carlson and the 25 million people who listen to him. And I'm not offended as a Jew. I'm offended as somebody who values the truth. I'm offended as somebody who values humanity. I'm offended as somebody who hates the Nazis. Not because I'm a Jew. I don't hate the Nazis because I'm a Jew. I hate the Nazis because they're evil people. They were an evil ideology. They did evil things. And if you deny their evil, you're basically arguing for them. And that's scary. Because that means that that evil can rise up again and we can all be victims of it. Jews and non-Jews. So there's nothing collective here. And there's no victimhood. Indeed, the whole point of Israel is for Jews to get out of their state of victimhood. But I'm offended by people who tell lies. And the bigger the lie, and the more dangerous the lie, the more offensive it is as an individual. Ali, truth is relative and subjective when it comes to the past. Nothing is 100% fact in historical terms. There is zero historical evidence using Jewish people to build the pyramids of slaves, but that's still used in movies. Truth is not relative and subjective. Truth is absolute. Either the Jews built the pyramids or they didn't. I don't really care that much. It doesn't really matter to me that much. It happened thousands of years ago. It has no relevance to the modern world. So who cares? It's interesting. But whether the Nazis killed 6 million Jews in a systematic way or not, in just less than 100 years ago, is very relevant to you and to me. It's relevant because that ideology is still not dead. It still exists. It's relevant because some of my direct descendants died in those concentration camps. It's relevant because if the Nazis come back to power, which they could, they will come after me, whether I consider myself a Jew or not. They will come after me. It's relevant because Tucker Carlson makes it relevant. It's relevant because people are denying that it happened. But did it happen? Absolutely, for certain. There's no maybe. There's no subjective. There's no relativity about it. It's an absolute certainty it happened. There are photographs. There's written documentation. There's eyewitness testimony by the thousands. I mean, it's true that further back into, there's archaeological evidence, there are concentration camps where you can find them. You can find the bodies. You can find the remnants of the gas they used. I mean, by every standard of evidence, the existence of the Holocaust is a certainty. And to deny it is to strengthen the people who committed it. And by strengthening the people who committed it, you could have it happen again. Denying the Jews were slaves to the Egyptians 4,000 years ago makes no difference. It doesn't matter, and we don't have certainty in that case. We have evidence this way, that way, I don't know. I've never studied it because I don't care. But there's a huge difference. And to say that all history is subjective and relative. It's just like the standards of evidence in criminal law. There's standards of evidence in history. And some things we know with certainty, some things we know with high probability, but that doesn't mean we don't know anything. I mean, that's the postmodernist view, is we don't know anything about the past. It's all a matter of interpretation. It's all where you're sitting from. Who knows? That's the postmodern left. Mary Elaine says, thank you for your very moral anger. Thank you, Mary Elaine. I appreciate it. Jennifer, do you think that as the people who were alive during World War II die off, it becomes easier for subsequent generations to lie about what actually happened? Yeah, there's no question. There's no question. And what we really have to ask ourselves is, what's the motivation? What is driving them? And what's driving them is hatred, fear. We've talked about this, fear and hatred. What's driving them is, I think, sadly, the kind of perspective that Ali brought up. Everything's relative, everything's subjective. What's driving them is the growing tribalism, the growing collectivism, the growing irrationality, the growing mysticism. That's what's driving it. And I don't see how you stop this trend. I don't know where this country goes from here. I don't know how you counter it. Who counters it? How it gets counted, I just don't know. And does this election matter? Who wins? Probably not. The trend is probably set now. Nazis to the left of us, Nazis to the right of us. And part of that will be a rewriting of history. And then, look, there's certain things in history that you can argue about. Right? They're legitimate to argue about. That there's no certainty about. And there's certain things that really there's no legitimacy. That the evidence is overwhelming and conclusive. Raven says, art is generally a good way of viewing the culture. The movies thus far, for the most part, has been horrible. Movies coming out of Hollywood lack direction and meaning. No new ideas. 2024 has been a horrible movie year. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I don't know. I don't follow the movies like I used to. But that's probably true. But that's been true for the last 40 years when you lived through it. And on the other hand, there have been years, I remember there were years where the movies were really good and quite positive. And it was a mistake to conclude from that the culture was turning positive. That is, art is a good way of viewing the culture, but it's very noisy. And it's very difficult to identify great art or art that is reflective of a cultural change. Very difficult. I think it's better to do it on a decade-by-decade basis than on a year-by-year. And you need a little distance from it to be able to see it. But yeah, I mean, the movies coming out of Hollywood have not been impressive for a very long time. And, yep. And the culture's heading in a bad direction. All right, let's see. Lucinda, hey Lucinda. So it says, I've read that Dave Harriman, all the editing that he did on that book was authorized by Leonard Peikoff. He did it with guidance of Leonard and with his agreement. I don't think that there are any real substantive issues with the editing of the book. I mean, decisions were made that I'm sure other people might make differently. about how to edit certain things, but I don't think it's substantive. And I think the book is amazing, and you should definitely be reading it, and you shouldn't worry about the editing. And anybody who's worried about any particular passage or any particular issue, everything's available in the archives for people to check up against, to measure it up against. People are making a big deal about something relatively pretty minor, I'd say. Let's see. Thanks, Lucinda. Henry, can you please stop assuming that Tucker and Peterson are simply mistaken? We found out yesterday that Russia pays their kind. Well, I don't know what we found out yesterday, right? It's also Peterson's being paid off by the Russians. This is ideological. This is their beliefs. And it's not beliefs that are just mistaken. And this is my point. These are beliefs that are morally offensive. So, particularly with Tucker, I don't think Peterson's quite gone to the kind of level that Tucker's gone to, although I wish Peterson would condemn Tucker. Tucker is ideologically becoming, a fascist, an anti-Semitic fascist. Peterson is still all over the place, but certainly on Putin, really, really bad. Some people received money from the Russians. There's no question about that. We know that, right? How much of that was known by people like Tim Pool and Dave Rubin? They all deny knowing anything about it. So we'll see how this develops and how this evolves in terms of knowing exactly who got paid for what. But I don't think that you can just take everybody on the right and say, oh, they're just being paid by the Russians. And that is too easy, right? The reality is we're dealing with an intellectual battle, a philosophical battle, and we have to address it intellectually and philosophically. We have to address their collectivism. We have to address their mysticism. We have to address the anti-capitalism. We have to deal with it intellectually. I don't think they're just all paid off. I mean, again, it's too easy. It's too, it's the conspiracy theory type thinking, which is, it makes everything understandable. But the reality is that people are driven by ideas. All right, Michael, was Ayn Rand a Jewish thinker? Will you be responding to that hit piece? I haven't read it. I don't know if I'm going to read it, so I'm not going to respond. She was an American. No, she was not a Jewish thinker. There's nothing about Ayn Rand that's Jewish. I mean, she might have, she might had certain mannerisms or whatever. I don't know. There's nothing that I know of Ayn Rand that's Jewish. So people in the world in which we live can only think in terms of tribal categories. And they have to fit Ayn Rand into a tribal category. And making her a Jewish thinker is their way of dealing with it. And I was confused the contrary with the brave. To automatically react against the mainstream is just as irrational and second-handed as automatically going along. Automatic there. It's not automatic. They are rejecting. It's not just that they're anti-left. It wouldn't be as bad if they were just anti-left, if that's it. They're reactionaries. You're calling it reactionaries. And what is a reactionary? Somebody who longs for the past, who wants to go to the past. And what past in their case? I think it's the medieval period. I think that's what they want. Although the nationalism is not part of medievalism. But anyway, they want a nationalist Christianity. And that they want not from the perspective of just being anti-left. That's in the perspective of being anti-reason, anti-individualism, and anti-capitalism. That's essentially what they are. So we have to take what the actual ideas are and combat those. Yeah, there is I just see it on Twitter, there is a interview with Ilan Juno and Harry Binswanger on Was Ayn Rand a Jewish Thinker? So Michael, you should go check that out. And I doubt that I need to add much to that. But yes, being a nonconformist that is doing everything the opposite of what the mainstream does is being conformist. Your standard is still the mainstream. Lucinda, the danger with what Tucker did isn't just that some people might take this guy seriously. By the way, just before I finish the question, the following he has on Twitter and on his podcast has gone through the roof. The guy was a nobody. And now he's got, I think, hundreds of thousands of followers. I mean, just through the roof. So Tucker's endorsement makes a massive difference. A massive difference. All right, the danger with what Tucker did isn't just that some people might take this guy seriously, but the attempt to move culture away where similar ideas can be accepted. Yes, Tucker isn't just empowering. It's called the Overton window. The Overton window is the range of views that his views as acceptable, right? It can move a little bit to the left, it can move a little bit to the right, it can expand, it can shrink. But this is the range of the ideas that the culture accepts as reasonable. What Tucker is doing is expanding the Overton window on the right to include the Nazis. Not in terms of free speech, but in terms of acceptable, in terms of reasonable ideas that we can debate and discuss. Nazism, until recently, was not in the Overton window. It was like, now, I mean, that's stupid. Nazis, we've done with that. We've concluded that that is absolutely 100% wrong. We want nothing to do with that. Well, now Tucker is expanding it, and by doing so, he's bringing the Nazi ideology and Nazi sympathizers of all kinds and neo-Nazis. That's Tucker, what Tucker wants to do. I think that is intentional. Absolutely intentional. Let's see, friend Harper. I get the impression that what most people mean by the West, that's right today, but that's part of what the battle is for. What we need, what the battle is for the defining what Western civilization means. Or if you want, just what civilization means. But Western civilization is a unique concept. It's different than Eastern civilization or other civilizations of the past. Western civilization has a unique meaning. And then the question is, what is it? And that's what the fight is about. And I'm arguing, and I'm trying to establish, and we'll do a lot more on this, including maybe a book, on that Western civilization is Enlightenment ideas, that's what Western civilization means. It's the embodiment of Enlightenment ideas. America is the political embodiment of Enlightenment ideas. So Western civilization, the civilization, capitalism, the Industrial Revolution, the free system of free countries, all that is an embodiment, a manifestation of reality of Enlightenment ideas, and that is what Western civilization is, whether people acknowledge it or not. And it's geographically true as well. It's a civilization that exists in the West, is manifest from Enlightenment ideas. Now, it's not geographic in the sense that I think that those ideas are spread geographically to include Japan and South Korea and Taiwan and once Hong Kong and to some extent Singapore. But that's the civilization we're talking about, Enlightenment civilization. None of that, America, capitalism, Industrial Revolution, the West as a concept, none of that exists without the Enlightenment. The West is bad, as different, because it's free. Jonathan, would Tucker defect in a NATO-Russia war? I hope. That would be good. I mean, it would be good to just get them on the side that they already belong. Just get them there. Just put them, just quickly and easily define them as such. Would he? Probably not. He's too coward, I think, to actually defect. Enric, the West is trapped in altruism to protect their tribe from fear of the other. Yeah, you could argue that it's stuck in tribalism, it's stuck in mysticism, which are destroying the world. And it's trapped with those ideas. And without a major revolution, but I don't know where that revolution is going to come from. It has to come from us. There is no other place. There is no other place. Lucinda, was I hoping too much when I expected chat to be in mostly universal agreement when it comes to condemning Nazi sympathizers? No, I mean, you would think. Again, the Overton window is shifted. Just, I'd say, certainly pre-Trump. And I know, comes back to Trump. Certainly pre-Trump, Nazi sympathizers would have been universally condemned. And they have slowly, with the alt-right, you remember the alt-right? With the alt-right and now the new right, they have slowly gotten a bigger and bigger foothold, a bigger and bigger bridgehead into popular culture. And now Nazi sympathizers, I think, all over the right. But it really started with Trump and the alt-right back in 2015, 2016. But they were ridiculed, the alt-right, in those days. And now they've been mainstreamed. It's exactly that shift in the Overton window. Right? Robert, more proof of the disaster that is Trump's Republican Party, replacing all credible opposition to the left with a cult of conservatism and personality at its worst. Yeah, I mean, they basically destroyed the Republican Party. That's what Trump did. Replaced it with a cult of his personality and a cult of tribalism and nationalism and I don't even want to call it conservatism because I don't think conservatives would even recognize it. Even traditional conservatives that I don't agree with. It's just a cult of the irrational, the cult of emotionalism, and a cult of Trump. Trump is an unmitigated disaster for the Republican Party and for the country. Henry, don't you think Rubin ought to have inquired who was paying him millions for a handful of videos? I'm not so sure he's innocent in this. I just don't know. I mean, he could have been lied to. He was being paid by a media company. I don't know if he knew who was funding the media company. I don't know whether pressure was put on him or Tim Pool or anybody else to take certain positions vis-a-vis Russia in order to get the money, in order to get payment. I just don't know. That's the reality. I don't. So I don't want to condemn anybody until we know more facts. And I'm willing to hear and I'm eager to hear their side. I did see this rant on Twitter by Tim Pool that is just so unhinged around Russia that he did a few months ago. So unhinged around Russia and hateful about the Ukrainians and supportive of Russia that I don't know. And again, this guy, here's another guy, Tim Pool, huge following, huge, massive. And that rant was completely unhinged, and you got to wonder. But I'm willing to wait and see what the evidence points to. Gail, I'm afraid of another Holocaust. I don't think we'll see it in our lifetime, but it's certainly, and I also, as I've said before, I think the next Holocaust will be against Muslims in Europe, but it's certainly scary times. And things are deteriorating faster than I think we would have expected. I would have expected. I mean, Leonard Peikoff seems to have been right all along, to be as pessimistic as he was. Lucinda, Darrell Cooper presenting those two pictures as two alternatives has some ugly implications about how he and Tucker view the world as a choice between the two and about what side they see themselves on. Yeah, I mean, a culture that is let's go all out. A culture that embraces transgender versus the Nazis. If that's all I know about it, I'll take the culture that embraces transgender over the Nazis any day. I'll take France of today over France under Hitler or the Vichy government any day. It's not even close. Not even close. I'll take Germany today with its Muslim problem, with, leftists in power and everything, over Nazi Hitler Germany any day. And I think most Germans would too. Does it come even close? I mean, am I wrong here? Do you guys disagree? Why would there be a Holocaust against Muslims when they can simply be deported? Because A, they can't simply be deported. It's not that easy to do. And B, why not? Once you get to the point where you hate an entire people, once you get to the point where you hate all Muslims, once you get to the point where you want retribution against all Muslims, once you blame all your problems on people, call them Muslims in this case, and Muslims give you more reason to hate them than anybody else, then why not just exterminate them? Why bother with deporting them? They'll try to come back. They'll smuggle in. They're an evil element in the world. And of course, people, just to be clear, I'm not for any of that. You have to differentiate between Muslims. There are Muslims who hold an ideology that is anti-ethical to human life, the Islamists, and they need to be fought by every means possible. We're at war with them, whether we know it or not, and they need to be defeated. And then there's the everyday Muslims that I don't think pose a threat to anybody, mostly to themselves. But the Islamists, which is a lot of people, hundreds of millions of people, need to be fought and defeated. Fought and defeated. And the number one battleground to do that is not Germany. The number one battleground to do that is Iran. Isn't it interesting that these knifing attacks are coming at a time when so many in the West are supporting Hamas? Isn't it interesting that there was a lot of Muslim terrorism in Europe when ISIS was at its peak? And then when ISIS's power was diminished, terrorism in Europe went almost to zero. And now when the West is, again, legitimizing terrorists, in this case, Hamas, and Hamas is viewed as powerful and strong and successful, and they killed Jews and so on, the terrorism increases. Terrorism, particularly in Europe, is primarily a phenomena of people believing, Muslims believing, that the Islamist cause can be won. If you defeat the Islamic cause, terrorism will decline to zero probably. We saw that with ISIS. We see that in Israel all the time with the way Israel deals with terrorism. And the number one Islamist regime in the world that needs to be defeated is Iran. And once you defeat Iran, the air goes out of all these terrorist organizations. And the air goes out even of the individual Muslim crazy nut who takes a knife and tries to cut people up. Because what's he doing it for when the cause is lost? So the key here is to make it clear to them the cause is lost. And you can't do that unless you defeat Iran. So deporting Muslims is not the solution. Defeating Iran is the solution. Lucinda, let's go to those donation goals, guys. And remember to like and share the show, everyone. Yeah, Lucinda's got the right attitude. Where are you guys with the goals? I mean, we're in the second hour, and we're still quite a bit short of the goal for the second hour. I don't know where. We need a few stickers. We've got a lot of people watching, and when you need, it would be great to show value for value. You're obviously watching, listening. You must get something out of the show. Show some appreciation by using the super chat, stickers, or a question. Would appreciate it. Okay, we've only got 2 questions, and they're going to go fast, so this will probably it. So if you want to support the show while we're on live, do so quickly, and you can do $2, $1, $50, $100. Let me just see who we've got. A bunch of stickers. John, thank you, John. I haven't thanked the stickers today. Vadim, thank you, Vadim. Really appreciate it. Let's see, John again. John did 2 stickers. Let's keep going. Who else? Not a lot of stickers today. Where are my whales with some $50, $100 stickers to get us over the goalpost here? God, going back. A lot of chat today. But, okay, let's go all the way to the beginning. Oh, John Glue, thank you for the sticker. Mary Aline, thank you. Lucinda, thank you. All right, I think I got everybody. All right, Hunter, thank you, Hunter. A Barnes & Noble in Houston renovated as part of their refocus on book strategy. A large image of the cover of Atlas Shrugged hangs alongside a dozen or so other classic covers on the wall above the shelves. Small win. Yes, I mean, I remember those posters. There used to be one at the Barnes & Noble in Orange County. They come and go from different Barnes & Nobles. Those posters were created a long time ago as part of a program the Ayn Rand Institute worked with Penguin, the book's publisher, to promote the bookstores, to carry the books and so on. And a lot of bookstores had them. In the old days, Borders had posters. They had the book in the summer reading program. They had them at the end shelves. The challenge today is bookstores are basically dead. And to get Amazon to promote Atlas Shrugged is a lot more difficult. It's a lot more challenging. So, because they don't want to be viewed as, promoting books based on a paid program. So that's the challenge. Thank you, Fed Hopper. Thank you, Lucinda. Thank you, Shazbot. These are a few stickers kind of trickling in here. Really, really appreciate it. We're slowly getting closer to the goal. All right, Chad says, Dave Smith just posted Lincoln was a bad guy. Yeah, I mean, the libertarians have thought that Lincoln was a bad guy for a long time. This is the anarchists, those people who believe, slavery wasn't that big of a deal, certainly didn't justify fighting a war over. It was disappearing anyway for economic reasons. So it would have taken another 50 years and there would be no slavery. 50 years, right, of people enslaved. And Lincoln was a really bad guy because he instituted an income tax and he instituted a draft. Both things that they believe are wrong. And I agree, they're wrong, and he shouldn't have done it. But they don't qualify him, in my view, at all as being a bad guy. He was a good guy, overwhelmingly a good guy, on the right side of history. On the right side of history. But that's these crazy libertarians. It's why I don't like to be called a libertarian. It's why I don't associate with libertarians. It's why I'm not a libertarian, because they're nuts. These are the kind of ideas that make them out to be nuts, but these are the kind of ideas that are very popular and that affiliate them with the reactionary, call it New Right, with the New Right. They're also, Dave is also vehemently anti-Israel and borderline anti-Semitic, so it's, they just hate any phenomena that is where the state does pretty well. State eradicated slavery, that's good. Must be evil. The state respects rights reasonably well. Oh, America must be really bad. Israel must be really bad. Ann says Mark Pellegrino had his hands full with Dave Smith. Yeah, I mean Dave is clever, and he's sharp and he's funny, and it's hard to deal with people like that. But he's also ignorant, and just he's ignorant and immoral in the sense that he has his priorities are all messed up. His values are all distorted and messed up. I haven't watched that debate, but I can imagine that Dave Smith is not easy. But it's awful. Jacob, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate that. Let's see. Mirabens. More coded messages to philosophy at work. Immigrants have more stylish haircuts. They're going to take our bobs. All right. I didn't know that about immigrants, about stylish haircuts. Jacob Collin. I love the problem solving of manufacturing, but I hate the leadership team at my plant. Do you think consulting at a big four would be a better option? Oh, I don't know. It really depends. I mean, are those the only two options? Are there other plants where you could do manufacturing and maybe have a better leadership team? Consulting is very different because you don't own the product. You come in and out, so it's a different experience. It's not quite as related and connected. So, yes, I'd have to know a lot more to give you advice about something like that. But consulting is a very different job, and you should, if you really love the manufacturing, then you should look for a different team, for a different circumstance, for a different position where you don't have to deal with this particular leadership team. Stephen Harper. I am looking forward to attending the RANDS Day conference in Naples, Florida from January 31 to February 2nd. Yeah, here they're announcing that. It will be nice to see Harry Benswani, Peter Schwartz, and you speak. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. January 31 to February 2nd. I plan to be there. Steph B. Thanks, Yaron. Enjoying the shows and loving the member-only content. Great. I need to produce more members-only content. I'll do that once I get back to Puerto Rico, and I'll start getting on a regular schedule with that. Chad, will you lecture in Las Vegas or Boston sometime? I have nothing scheduled. Again, I say this often, I go where I'm invited. So if you can get one of the student groups at some university in Boston to invite me, I would love to come. Same in Las Vegas or some other group of businessmen, YPO, Young Presidents Organization, a Jewish group to talk about Israel. Any group that is interested in having me come and speak, have them get in touch with me, whether in Vegas or Boston or anywhere. I would go anyway. My next speaking engagements are probably going to be in Tennessee, probably at Vanderbilt and at the Bastiat Society in Nashville, and then maybe out in Chattanooga, one of the universities in Tennessee. So I expect that is my next speaking, public speaking engagement. Robert, you've said that in today's podcast-rich environment, we need many more objectivist voices in the mix. Slowly but surely, we're making that happen. But the Yaron Brook Show remains the best. Kudos. Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. But yes, there were a lot more voices today. There were a lot of good objectivists. There's a lot of good objectivist content. I in particular, the Ayn Rand Institute is putting out some amazing stuff, really, really high-quality videos. Ankar and Ben and Ilan and the rest of the team there are really putting out great content. Harry is doing one about is Ayn Rand a Jewish thinker. It maybe is on right now. I'm encouraged, and then there's a bunch of new intellectuals coming. You're seeing Nikos do a lot of this stuff, but there's others on the way that are going to be engaged and going to be doing. You see some of them at Ocon. There's a new generation, and they are active, and support them. Go subscribe, follow them on Twitter, and help promote their content. Andrew, if Trump loses, will the more respectable on the right splinter from MAGA? Is MAGA an enduring force or a hollow movement? Look, I think it's a hollow movement in the sense that it's a movement focused on one person. But the question is, will it get captured by an ideology or by a new personality? I mean, this is what Trump did to the Tea Party. He basically captured it. He captured a hollow movement, a movement that didn't have much content, and changed it. And I think that's what MAGA has proven, is you can have a personality worship, you can have an ideology like that as on the right, and that can be captured and that can be embraced, and I think that's what MAGA is going to become, even if Trump loses. I don't think anything good is going to come of this movement of MAGA, and I don't think you're going to see the splintering. Look, this splintering of the respectable right, supposedly, happened after Trump lost in 2020. And then as soon as he came back on the scene, initially a lot of people in the respectable, so-called respectable right, avoided endorsing him, avoided supporting him, and ultimately they all fell into place. Yes, sir. Yes, master. We're right behind you. So, that might happen again. I don't know. What's really scary is who follows Trump, and is there somebody more charismatic, smarter than Trump, who can capture the imagination of these people? I don't know. All right, on our last question, we're $17 short of our goal for the second hour. $17, maybe somebody can jump in and do that. Buzz says, has Tucker always been hostile to Jews or recently? I don't think Tucker's been hostile to Jews in the past. I don't know that for a fact. But Tucker used to be this kind of free market, small L libertarian type, do your thing. Put it this way. In the past, I'd say pre-Trump, Tucker gave no indication of having any views about the Jews, any negative views. No indication of that. I don't know what he really believed deep down, but again, there was no evidence of that. He did change during his time at Fox. He clearly changed during that period, and he slowly but systematically kept embracing bigger and bigger and bigger parts of the new right, the alt-right, the new right, the MAGA, the more sophisticated MAGA, if you will, if that's possible. I don't know. All right, we're just $15 short. Jonathan says, will Trump run again in 2028 if he loses? I don't know. He'll be 83, 82. I don't think he'll run again, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of his sons run. I definitely think they are, in one way or another, they're being groomed to replace Donald. I do think they think of themselves as this potential family dynasty. So the sons are definitely being prepped for that role, I think. Nev Fell, thank you. Appreciate the support. Let's see. Andrew, how is the art scene in Spain? It's mixed. The Spanish did not have the sense of life, and in many ways the skill set at least not initially, of the Italian Renaissance or later. The Spanish were much more religious than the Italians. Their sense of life was much more authoritarian and much more religious than the sense of life of the Italian Renaissance and then the Italian Baroque and then the kind of the French 19th century, if you will. So it was interesting. We were at the museum yesterday in Seville, and the Spanish maintained the religious themes far further along, far later, for far longer than the rest of Europe, where clearly the center of focus is moving away from religious themes to secular themes. Technically, in many respects, the Dutch and the Italians are better, but some of the Spanish studied in Italy and were probably as talented in sheer talent, but they were malevolent. They had a real malevolent Christian thing going, right? I mean, if you look at El Greco with his elongated figures, he does that on purpose because he's got a certain view of man which is primarily which is ugly and dark, and you can see that in his paintings. He's not trying to achieve realism. He's trying to achieve this sense of life, this malevolence, and he portrays it very, very well, very effectively. It's horrible. So if you think about it, there's not a lot of Spanish art that you go, oh, wow. Oh, yeah, I want to go see that again. I mean, there's some great paintings in the Prado in Spain, and there's some magnificent portraits of Velázquez. And, we saw some beautiful paintings by Murillo, I guess, a Spanish painter. But they were all religious themed, but they were beautifully done. And there's some amazing paintings of crucifixions by... I forget the guy's name, but where the background is really, really black, and he has this, I mean, I think they're beautifully painted, but again, they're crucifixions. I can't think of there was some 19th century painting and 19th century sculpture that we saw that were good, but nothing exceptional, nothing that goes, wow, who's that artist? I want see more of his stuff. Like you do if you go to Italy. Like, nobody's ever heard of 19th century Italian art. Like, it's just not a thing. 19th century, the focus of attention had moved to France, and to some extent even to England. And yet you go to museums in Italy, and you go to the 19th century part, and you go, whoa, these guys were good, and they were interesting, and they had great themes. There was a vibrancy, particularly in sculpture. I mean, 19th century Italian sculpture is magnificent. We just don't have that in Spain. So Spain is just not a powerhouse when it comes to art. So a couple of flamenco shows. I really like flamenco. It's an interesting art form in terms of its expressiveness. It's very emotionally expressive. Very emotionally expressive. Sensual. By the way, I'm spending more time because Richard came in with $100. So thank you, Richard. So you bought some extra time for the Yaron Brook show. For that. Flamenco, it's a really interesting art form. And I know some of you are now turning off, or what's his name? Nevel is yawning or whatever. Nevfel in Turkey is yawning. But I don't think we can change the culture without dealing with art and aesthetics. But it's super expressive, super emotional, doesn't hold anything back. And it's not super sophisticated. Certainly musically, it's not sophisticated. And even in the dance, I don't think it has the sophistication of ballet or something like that. But in terms of the emotional expressivity, it's just amazing. It's also got this sensuality, and it's okay to be sensual. It's okay to express sensuality. it's got this, particularly the male side, the men convey a certain sense of confidence and arrogance that is really refreshing, a masculinity that is refreshing, that is very different, that women have this real sensual femininity about them. But the other part that is really unique, I think, to flamenco, and I think flamenco at its best, is it has this capacity to convey conflict and anger and emotions of fight. I'm angry and I'm not going to stand for it. I'm going to fight. I'm going to show him. I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to go for it. But in an angry, there's real power in it. In a woman scorned and really standing up for herself and angrily, condemning, or a man who's, sometimes they actually do these where it's almost like a fight. I respond to that. There's that sense that both the female and the male dancers give off this sense of, we're not giving in, and we're going to fight for what is ours, and we're going to express our anger, and we're going to express our emotions, and we're not going to compromise, and we're not going to be mealy-mouthed about this. And it's very refreshing in a repressed culture. There's nothing repressed about flamenco. So, if you've never seen it, I encourage you to go see it. Yesterday, we were at a place where there was just 2 rows of seats. They were literally right in front of us. The guy could have stepped on my toes. I'm glad he didn't, because they have those shoes where they tap on. Tap dancing is probably came out of flamenco, I think. I don't know. We'd have to research that. But it's a completely benevolent, tap dancing is a completely benevolent interpretation of it. This has definitely got a dark side to it, but it's got a dark side of again, fight. It's not a dark side of, oh, I'm depressed, life's miserable, life's horrible, I'm just going to sit here and feel sorry for myself. It really has a spirit to it, a spirit of a fighting spirit. It's not an accident that it comes out of the gypsy culture, right? A minority that's always under attack, that's always been historically discriminated against and attacked in Europe, in different parts of Europe. And this angry fighting spirit is I guess, part of this art form. Anyway, I encourage you to go see it if you have a chance to see good flamenco. Lucinda, the amount of comments on ARI's Was Ayn Rand a Jewish Thinker video that think they're saying that she is because they didn't bother watching the first 5 minutes of the video is embarrassing. Yeah, well, God. Ann M says, at what point is it no longer okay to go on Tucker? I think the point is now. I think it's no longer okay to go on Tucker. No longer okay to go on Tucker. I would not go on Tucker, even though it would boost my ratings, it would boost my income, it would boost everything. I would not go on Tucker. From my perspective, he's a Nazi sympathizer, and you don't associate with Nazi sympathizers, period. I wouldn't go on So I think we've reached a point. I think we're here. Ginger says, Capoletti was a Spanish painter who Ayn Rand loved. Ayn Rand really, really loved Capoletti. He was a Spanish painter. 20th century. Dali, of course, was a Spanish painter. That's the other part. Oh, I should mention Dali. Dali, of course, is a Spanish painter of the 20th century. So Spain had a little, peak in painting with Dali and Capoletti. And it's not an accident. Dali is very much a surrealist. And while his painting is surrealist in when it refinement, the smooth surface, epistemologically, the clarity of everything, I think one of Ayn Rand's favorite paintings was the crucifixion of Jesus, the way Dali done. So we've been to the Dali Museum. And yeah, I mean, there's some dollies that are magnificent. Some dollies that are just plain weird, and generally he is just plain weird. But he's also fun and interesting. So we've been to a couple of exhibits of dollies. So fun and interesting. So I kind of like Dali. My wife and I, when we first met, we were very young, but we both had the same. We only had one poster on our wall, and it was the same poster of one of Dali's paintings. And then Capoletti he's mostly not surrealist, although, he's not surrealist. He doesn't have any surrealist paintings. He has very much the Dali style to him in some of his paintings. And yeah, some of his are beautiful, beautiful. And he was Ayn Rand's, I think, favorite painter ultimately. And she owns some Capolettis, and they are truly magnificent. Ginger says, Capoletti's depiction of flamenco dancers is amazing. Do I know those paintings? I must have seen them because I think I've got Capoletti's book at home, so I'll check them out. It's actually a subject that would be really good for painting, because you can capture movement and sensuality in both the female and the male form, femininity, masculinity. You can capture it in a painting. I think it's a great subject for painting. Wes, thank you for the $50. Really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. All right, we're really chipping away at our 3-hour goal. We're almost there, guys. So this is great. Thank you all. In particular, Richard and Wes, who came in with a significant contribution. Robert says, Amy Nasser is a member of the dance group Compañeros de Flamenco, and they are dancing at the Detroit Institute of Arts this afternoon. Yes, a very passionate style of dance. Yes, I mean, that's fantastic. Good for her. It seems like it would be a lot of fun to do. Spain is the place to do it, particularly Seville and Madrid. I think Seville and Madrid are the real centers of, I mean, Andalusia generally, South Spain. I think Cadiz is another center, but mainly Seville is the hub of flamenco dancing. You're being prejudiced. I'm not yawning now. I'm not sure why I'm being prejudiced. In what sense am I being prejudiced? So I'm not sure what you mean by me being prejudiced. But I'm glad you're not yawning. Jonathan, thoughts on Picasso? God. There's a lot to say about Picasso. First of all, unbelievable talent. So whatever you think of his later painting, when he was young, he could paint. He knew the art. He had the skill, he had the ability, and he knew the technique. He chose Cubism. He chose, and he went through a few other phases before that, and I think after that, he chose to present reality in a distorted way. Now, a lot of them do. I think El Greco does too, right? They choose to distort reality. He chose to completely break reality apart, and purposefully and in a systematic, thoughtful way, right? Because when you look at in the Cubist period, which is what made him famous, you can see the images there. You can see what he's done to them. But he's just completely distorted them and distorted reality. And I think he does that on purpose. This is his rebellion against reality, his rebellion against the senses, his rebellion against objectivity, his rebellion against reason. So Picasso is rebelling against not just a certain style in art that came before him, but he's rebelling against a certain philosophy. he's a product very much of the post-World War I sense of life. I mean, this is a whole show that we should do sometime. World War I was a cataclysmic event for European culture. It shattered European confidence. It shattered their belief in an objective reality, in the goodness of capitalism, in the kind of sense of life that the 19th century had embedded in them, of progress, of achievement, of success, of material wealth. All of that was shattered by World War I. I mean, millions of kids died in that war for nothing. Nothing. And everybody knew it was for nothing. And they were just slaughtered in the trench wars. And a whole generation just perished. A generation of artists and poets. And just as in many respects, the West was peaking, right? Economically and culturally and artistically. The 19th century had been this amazing time. And it all got shattered in World War II. And if you think about an artist like Picasso, I think they were so resentful of the world, so resentful of the reality that existed around them, that they chose to shatter it. And I think that's what you see in Picasso. So Picasso's an artist. There's no question about the fact that his is art as compared to, let's say, I don't know, the guys who splash paints on canvas. Pollock did that. Pollock did that, splashing. That's not art. That's bullshit, right? Picasso's art. It's just art with, and you could even argue, it's good art, not good in its theme. It's awful in its theme, both epistemological and metaphysical themes. But it's good in its conveying whatever theme it has well. That shattering of the world, that shattering of hope, that shattering of belief in reality, that shattering of belief in mankind, he conveys it very, very well. And it's there. I forget that, he lived through the Spanish Civil War, which was traumatic for many artists, because again, it was a form of just people dying for what? And then World War II. Now, at some point, I think he probably became cynical and was just doing stuff because people would pay him gazillions of dollars for any scribble he did. And it seems like later in life, he was just doing that. But I think his early part in his Cubist period, I think it was real. And I think it was motivated by real philosophy, a bad philosophy, but a real philosophy. But somewhat understandable in the sense of not being an intellectual and experiencing the world of World War I and what followed. So I think Picasso is interesting, but an awful artist in the sense of his themes and his sense of life and sense of what he's projecting. I don't like looking at his paintings. I find them offensive. The way he takes a female figure. I mean, he takes something beautiful and shatters it. But that's the point. He's doing that on purpose. A lot of 19th century, a lot of early 20th century and late 19th century artists knew what they were doing and then purposefully shattered it, purposefully destroyed it. To some extent, Rodin did that in sculpture. Not to the extent Picasso does it in painting, but he still does it. He takes beauty and he turns it into ugliness, and he starts sculpting ugliness. All right, let's see. I don't know. Is Nefel yawning now? I'm in suspense. There he is. Lucinda, let's reach that goal. Yes, let's reach that goal. We're only now $45 away from reaching our 3-hour goal, which is fantastic. Jason, briefly, thoughts on Cubist architecture generally. Ooh, Cubist architecture. I don't know what Cubist architecture is exactly. I don't think I know what Cubist architecture. I know what Cubist painting. Maybe Bauhaus architecture. I'm not a great fan. Yeah, but I don't know it well enough. But I'm not a big fan. I'm a fan of of good modernism, but even there, I'm not a fan of Mies van der Rohe. Is that his name? Mies van der Rohe. I'm not a fan of 60s architecture, which is concrete and ugly. I'm a fan of Frank Lloyd Wright, and then I'm a fan of many of the architects who are working today. I think there's some beautiful architecture today out there, and some gorgeous skyscrapers, particularly in Asia, maybe even in places like Dubai, unfortunately. There's some pretty beautiful architectural buildings. Yeah, but I don't know enough about Cubist architecture or Bauhaus to comment. Nefel says, I'm enjoying your talks on art. Movie reviews sound too personal. Doing them in a separate video would be better. No, I actually don't think, well, if they are personal, then that's my fault. I don't intend them to be personal. And because I think I know a lot about movies, and I think I have a good, a good sense of movie making. But if they come across as personal, then that's my, I need to do a better job at making them objective, I guess. Stephen Harper, this is the last question. Dali was the mystery guest at a What's My Line television show in the early 1950s, available on YouTube. That would be funny. Dali was a real character, a real character. He had a great relationship with his wife, from everything we can tell, and they had quite a romance and quite a life together. So in that's quite inspiring. Going to the museum and seeing that was very inspiring. Yes, the art it's not a real art, right? It's not an art, but the art that the Spaniards excel at is cooking food. They're really good at food, and they've really introduced a new way of cooking and a new way of viewing food, which really started at this restaurant in not far from Barcelona, about an hour and a half drive north of here, called El Bulli, which is now closed, but El Bulli is being turned into this museum. And if you're a real foodie, as we are, then it's quite an experience to go to El Bulli. El Bulli is a legendary restaurant, considered for years and years the best restaurant in the world when it was open. And it changed cooking, and it changed restaurants everywhere. And pretty much every restaurant today that is up there as one of the top restaurants in the world was inspired by El Bulli. And they have a museum up there to El Bulli, and it was quite interesting. I mean, not everything, but a lot of it was very interesting. And they really thought about the food in a way somewhat similar to the way artists think about art. So, yeah, highly recommend. If you're ever up here and you're into food, don't do it if you're just casual about it, but you're into food, then it's also in a beautiful location on the coast, northeast of here. Andrew, best exclusive restaurant you've been to so far on your trip, and best cheap food? Yeah, I mean, the best restaurant we've been to here on this trip was a restaurant called Disfrutar. It's it just, I think, this year won best restaurant in the world. Now, what happens with these best restaurant in the world lists now is once you win it, you can't run again. So you enter this best restaurants in the world category. So it just won it. Restaurants in the past have won it, if not competing anymore. And it was really amazing. It was really good. It was one of the best meals we've ever had. And we've been to some really good restaurants in the world. But I'd say quite a few of the best meals we've ever had have been in Spain. Maybe one in Italy. But mostly in Spain. Chicago. In terms of best cheap food, What was the best cheap food? I don't know. I mean, the best cheap food I think we've had is we went into this wine store and had the guy create a platter with a couple of types of cheese and I think some artichokes and olive oil and a really nice glass of Rioja red wine and just the cheese and the wine and the artichokes. That was fantastic. And we've done that in the past, but it's a nice meal. It's just to have a variety of different cheeses and a good glass of red wine. I don't drink more than a glass. I guess for most of you it would be a bottle of red wine. And that's not expensive. That's pretty cheap. Yeah, some people in the chat are making jokes that I don't understand. All right, guys, thank you. We're we get $30 away from the 3-hour goal, but we're not at 3 hours, so that's okay. Somebody wants to chip in the 25, that'd be great. Oh, there's 10. Daniel says, have you been to the Churchill war rooms in London? It's scary to think how the world might look if someone as spineless as Tucker were prime minister back then. Yeah, I mean, Tucker or Harris or Trump or Obama or any of these idiots. But yes, the war rooms in London are definitely worth visiting. If you're ever in London, take a couple of hours and go. It's right in the center of London. It's where Churchill spent a big chunk of the war underground as London is being bombarded, where the decisions were made. Look, I didn't say this earlier because I thought it was obvious, but I should have said it. Churchill is a hero. Churchill is a giant. He's a giant. And what he did to save Britain and to save Western civilization, which I think he did, I think Churchill saved Western civilization. Sometimes one man can make all the difference. And in this case, Churchill did, because he stood up, and he stood up to Hitler, and he rallied the British people, and he motivated them, and he inspired them, and he cultivated the United States. And when the United States, was attacked in Pearl Harbor, and Hitler declared war in the U.S., so the U.S. joined the fight, he was ready, and U.S. was ready, and Britain was ready, and then it was obvious they were going to win. But it wasn't obvious they were going to win in 1941. It wasn't obvious they were going to win during the Battle of Britain. It wasn't obvious they were going to win during Dunkirk, and the evacuation of Dunkirk. And it's almost like Churchill willed them into victory, and he didn't will them because he spoke, and he acted, and he strategized, and yeah. Churchill is a massive, massive hero. And go to the war rooms, definitely worth a visit. Vadim says, just watch the movie Brazil after your review. I enjoyed it, thanks. Great, I'm glad you did. It's a quirky movie, but I really like it. And I think I liked it more the second time. I think I remembered it a little differently. But I think I actually liked it more than I remembered I liked it, because it's been a while since I saw it. So I really enjoyed it. It's great. All right, everybody. I think I'm on tomorrow. I think we'll do a show tomorrow, because I'm not sure how many shows we'll do next week. Next week will be spotty. We're not doing a show on Sunday, but we will do Monday, and then we'll see after that. See you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.